Good afternoon. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Rowe, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, and I call the Tuesday, July 28, 2020 meeting of the Portsmouth City Council to order. And Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Glover?
Here.
Mrs. Lucas Burke?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons?
Here.
Mira?
Here. Ladies and gentlemen, in accordance with Governor Ralph Northam's declaration of a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 virus, the coronavirus, his executive order number 51, which he signed on March 12, 2020, and the local declaration of emergency ratified by the Portsmouth City Council, and due to the ongoing pandemic of the COVID-19 virus, which is continuing in the Commonwealth of Virginia and in Portsmouth, this special call meeting of the Portsmouth City Council is being held by video conference on this, the 28th day of July 2020, without a quorum present in the City Council's chamber in order to reduce the likely spread of the coronavirus in accordance with City Council Resolution 2020-21. Each member of City Council is participating from their home or some other remote location, and I am in the City Council chamber. This virtual meeting is also being broadcast live on Facebook Live, and we welcome everyone that's viewing our council meeting. Our first order of business is approval of minutes, and we have the minutes of a virtual meeting of July 16, 2020. So that we can put this matter before us for our consideration, is there a motion to approve these minutes?
Move adoption.
Second.
Is there a second? We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded. We're ready for discussion. Any discussion on the motion? And for the public and for my colleagues, all of our actions tonight will be by oral roll call vote. When your name is called, if you're in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. If you're opposed, nay. Hearing no questions, no further discussion, we're ready for the consideration of the motion, which is to approve. And Madam Clerk, will you call the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Glover?
Aye.
Mrs. Lucas Burke?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Aye.
Ms. Simmons?
Aye.
Mira?
Aye. And Madam Clerk, what was the vote?
7-0.
And the minutes are approved.
Yes,
we
sir.
next come to presentations, and we have several by the city manager and her team, and Dr. Pat.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. This evening, we have a COVID-19 pandemic update. Dr. Lauren James, Portsmouth Health Director, just returned to our city from Richmond after meeting earlier today with Governor Ralph Northam, Dr. Deborah Burke, the White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator, and other top health officials. As you may be aware, of the past few weeks, the Eastern region continues to rise in the number of COVID-19 positives. As you may be aware, this afternoon during the 2 o'clock press conference by the governor, he signed an executive order for Eastern Virginia to roll back somewhat with new restrictions that will take effect at 11:59 p.m. on Thursday, July the 30th. The next presentation, Mrs. Erin Tremier, Director of Public Utilities, will provide a summary update on the Lynn Shores and Merrimack Shores water actions taken by public utilities as they relate to the service delivery challenges that occurred this past weekend. We will have the 2020 legislative update tonight. Our city attorney, Mr. Solomon H. Ashby Jr., will present the annual update on the city's accomplishments as it relates to the City of Portsmouth legislative initiatives and an update on new laws passed during the 2020 General Assembly. Tonight's presentation will be followed in approximately 30 days with an additional update to you following the August 18th special Virginia General Assembly session. He will also present a CDA update. At your last meeting, you requested additional information concerning the Newport CDA, tax litigation and expenses related thereto. Tonight, Mr. Derek Challenger, Assistant City Attorney, and City Attorney Solomon H. Ashby Jr. will bring forward an update and further information regarding the tax and assessment litigation and operation. The city's treasurer, Mr. Page D. Cherry, is also available by phone to address any necessary issues. Following those presentations, the city manager has 2 report backs that will come forward. Dr. James.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, Mayor Rowe and council members and Dr. Patton. Today I will be giving the COVID-19 update. First slide, just going to review the basics. As we know, coronavirus symptoms are fever, sore throat, cough, difficulty breathing, fatigue, body ache, headache, loss of taste or smell, congestion, nausea, vomit, and diarrhea. And as we know, the virus is spread through respiratory droplets. And what we do know that works to slow the spread is social distancing, face covering, respiratory and hand hygiene, and staying home when ill, except for when you need to seek medical care. Next slide. This slide is a map of our transmission across the state. If you look at the eastern region, you can see that we are at substantial transmission. Factors that calculate and determine us to be at this level are our 7-day upward trend of cases, our increased positivity rate, which is over the 10%, which is a standard set by CDH. We are at 17% today, trending down a little bit, but still not at goal. And we also are seeing a trend in our hospitalizations. Our cases are highest in the age group of age 20 to 29, as well as 30 to 39. And these cases are often asymptomatic. Next slide. So locally, our health department is doing several things to mitigate. We are keeping constant communication with our city, schools, and community partners so that they are aware of our community transmission. We are updating them on trends of outbreaks, hospitalizations, ED visits, percent positivity, PPE usage, as well as our health workers who are affected. Other things we are doing, we are increasing our staffing, contact tracers, and contact investigators. These have been mentioned on various calls with, various meetings with the governor about how when we have cases, we have to follow up to help them be informed so they can inform their close contacts. We're looking at getting an additional epidemiologist and COVID resource positions. We will continue our community-based testing while focusing on our vulnerable populations who do not have easy or readily access to testing. We are working closely with our community leaders to work on community-led messaging. We are increasing restaurant, education, and enforcement. Next slide. This morning, I was lucky enough to be invited to meet with the governor and Dr. Frick, a global health official, to discuss trends in local transmission. There were various stakeholders from across the state. It was very informative. She was very open to sharing what she had seen in other parts of the country, and she was receptive to hearing about our local efforts and challenges. The governor's update this afternoon did reflect, as Dr. Patton discussed, that there will be no some changes in rolling back. There will be no alcohol served after 10 p.m. Restaurants will be closed after midnight, and indoor dining capacity will be reduced to 50%, and no gatherings of more than 50 people. And these changes are all to protect our population and slow the spread. Cases across Hampton Roads have been connected with social gatherings, family gatherings, and overall people relaxing their usage of social distancing and wearing masks. It will take about 2 to 3 weeks to see the changes once we implement this strategy. So 2 to 3 weeks later, we will see our cases start to trend down. So we have to be patient. This will not be immediate results. And my next slide has someone with a lovely face mask. And please, 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 we have so much evidence out there that when people wear their masks, they are so much safer. So even if you have personal beliefs that may lead you in a different direction, we ask that you think of others. And lastly, my last slide, there's a picture of the community. This is a community effort. We must partner together and hold each other accountable to slow the spread. So that's our businesses, our officials, our health department, our citizens. We all have to be accountable to have the greatest impact. And that is the end. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you, Dr. James. Does any member of council have any questions for Dr. James? The chair recognizes Councilman Bill Moody. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. James, on the 50% capacity for restaurants, does that include outdoor dining?
No, that doesn't. That only includes indoor dining, and outdoor dining, as long as there's social distancing, there's not a true capacity, if that makes sense. It would depend on the location. As long as they're within the limits of the restaurant and practicing social distancing, such as on a patio or the sidewalk.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions of Dr. James? Any other questions? Seeing none or hearing none, Dr. James, thank you very much for this report, and thank you for going to Richmond today, and thank you for all that you're doing to keep our community both safe and healthy.
Thank you as well, Mayor. I would like to thank you, the council, and the city manager for all of your support, and thank you for your time. You all have a good evening.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Pat?
Yes, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council will ask Mrs. Erin Tremier to come forward and give an update on the Lynn Shores and Merrimack Shores Summit.
Thank you, Dr. Patton. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of Council. Beginning Friday afternoon, Public Utilities began receiving calls and emails from customers in the Lynn Shore Merrimack Point area, informing us that we were experiencing low or no water pressures at their properties. Crews were dispatched to the area and began a systematic assessment of the Broad Street tank and surrounding distribution piping networks. During this work, no observable leaks were detected. However, it was observed that the altitude level control valve on the Broad Street tank had failed, restraining water from leaving the tank. This condition was mitigated by our ability to bypass water around the valve, and crews opened localized hydrants to assist in moving water into the neighborhood in an effort to improve system pressures. Operators at Lake Kilby continued to monitor system pressures overnight. Early Saturday morning, we continued to receive calls indicating that other factors were influencing the pressure and volume of water being received by customers in the area. Public utility crews were dispatched to the Frederick Boulevard booster pump station to manually verify pressures in the system were reflective of what the treatment plant was observing. Late Saturday morning, this verification revealed that the pressure transducer at the Frederick Boulevard station had malfunctioned, providing false pressure readings. This faulty component was promptly replaced, confirming that as a whole, the system was operating normally and that the issue was isolated to the Lynn Shore Merrimack Point neighborhood. The continuing low system pressures are typically indicative of a large water line break. However, one had yet to be discovered. Crews returned to the impacted area and continued to systematically evaluate hydrant pressures, exercise water valves, and search for leaks. Unfortunately, these efforts did not produce the anticipated outcome. At this juncture, the department engaged the services of their engineering consultant, Kimley Horn. Kimley Horn concurred with the department. Hello?
Is now joining.
Sorry. Kimley Horn concurred with the department's strategic approach to continue flushing hydrants in an effort to increase system pressures, and crews continued to work through the night to restore service to the area. These efforts restored service to approximately a third of the estimated 250 properties impacted. In addition, at approximately 5 a.m. Sunday morning, a water main break was discovered on Surrey Street near the intersection of Lynn Drive. This invisible leak had gone undetected to this point as the water main runs through a stormwater manhole and water from the leak was being discharged directly.
+17576423274 is now exiting.
Public Utilities immediately isolated the leak, contacted Miss Utility, and obtained outside contractor services. Isolation of the leak resulted in the immediate restoration of system pressures in the remaining areas. At 9:30 Sunday morning, Public Works mobilized and set up a bottled water distribution center for drinking and cooking. In addition, a tanker truck of non-potable water was provided for other household purposes. Due to the location of the break in relation to both existing infrastructure and proximity to the river, dewatering of the excavation was challenging and time-consuming. Contractors completed the repair at approximately 9 p.m. Sunday evening. Upon completion of this repair, Public Utilities employees followed up and confirmed with additional fire hydrant pressure tests that pressures in the system continued to reflect normal operations. Throughout this challenging event, city crews worked tirelessly to restore basic water service to citizens in the impacted area. The Department of Public Utilities has scheduled an internal review meeting for tomorrow morning to review the recent events and incorporate any lessons learned into existing operational procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does any member of council have any questions for the city manager or for our director?
Yes, sir. Simmons does.
Yes, ma'am. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Simmons.
Thank you, sir.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I think actually I'm usurping Mr. Moody's question from the weekend, but the answer I got was interesting enough. I told Dr. Patton I was going to ask it again. The question was, why did we not use reverse 911 to alert the citizens that we knew that we had a problem and were working on it? Because a lot of citizens were contacting members of council because they didn't know who to reach out or couldn't reach out to somebody to let us know that they didn't have any water. Dr. Patton, could you go over that with us?
Yes, and if I miss anything, I'll ask Mr. Jones to comment. Mr. Jones advised us during the weekend when we suggested the 911 that a very small percentage of our citizenry are able to get reverse 911 because that goes to a land-based line. It does not go to cell phones, only land-based lines. In addition, in talking with not only our public information and our communications and Mr. Jones, this was isolated. So once we found out that it was isolated, the question was asked, could we get the cell phone numbers of the persons who are in that area from their being customers of our city? And the answer to that was no. Their records are their private records. We could not access their cell phone numbers off of their records in public utilities. So with that, I have Mr. Pace that's going to share exactly what took place and how we began to get information out. Mr. Pace.
Yes, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, good evening. Relative to the issue, we responded to customer service calls through the 311 call center, and also some of us received personal calls on our phone, and we responded to them. We comprised and sent media alert relative to the low pressure issue on Saturday. We posted status information on social media sites to include Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Nextdoor. And mind you, we have about 45,000 subscribers on all of those social media sites. We also responded to media relations inquiry, and the Public Utilities Director provided an interview to one of the stations. Again, we uploaded the information, the alert on the city homepage relative to the low pressure issue, and also that press release that was sent out was uploaded to the city website as well. We uploaded a crawl that ran on Cctv relative to the low pressure issue. And the final thing that we did relative to the media is that we provided an update on Sunday night early so that it could run on the 10 and 11 p.m. news broadcast for that evening to apprise citizens as to what was going on. Thank you.
Members of council, I'm going to ask Mr. Jones to also provide some information.
Good evening, members of council. As Dr. Patton alluded to, the reverse 911 is a landline structure alerting device, and those numbers come in from the 911 emergency provider, which is Verizon. So those numbers, should we do that, would only go to a landline number. There are mechanisms to alert cell phones, but the audible tone that it sets off is an iPause alerting, and there is certain mechanisms and thresholds that have to be set before that can be set off in an emergency style alerting.
Any questions from any member of council for Dr. Patton? The chair recognizes Councilman Moody. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we indeed know what percentage of landlines are out there? I keep hearing not many people have them, but I tend to think that probably a lot of our senior citizens, me included, still have a landline. Do we know what that figure is?
Mr. Jones, do you know?
Yes, I don't have that number, but I can definitely provide that back to you. We do have the export that we get every month.
And my point is, even if it's only 15, 20%, I think in that type of situation, we would exhaust all methods of communication. It sounds like we had most of them covered, but I suspect that there are probably more landlines than we think in some of the communities. And can it hurt anything, or is it a laborious process to release a reverse 911 or 311?
Mr. Jones?
To send out a reverse 911, it has to meet certain threshold as governed by the contract that we signed with Verizon. At the time of that, we would have to look to see if a low pressure would meet one of those criterias. Now, if it was another emergency, then it would be more clear cut, but I don't know that a low pressure would meet that.
Well, not having water, and I've been the recipient of reverse 911 calls from the school system saying that it may snow tonight and school will start, 2 hours late. I think being without water falls into the pretty serious category. So I don't know about Verizon's threshold, but I think that's when you don't have water for over 24 hours, I think that's pretty serious emergency.
Do I need to say something there?
You may answer, please.
Yes, Mr. Moody, I concur. And in the review that will take place tomorrow with Mrs. Tremier and her team, we will have our Mr. Pace will also be a part of that so that we can revisit and have a report on going forward. As she said, this was an unexpected occurrence, and never would they have found it had they not started the tedious process of getting air out of the lines and finding something going into the Elizabeth River. So we'll definitely include that consideration in their meetings tomorrow and the report that they will.
And I do appreciate the frequent updates that you gave us, Dr. Patton. Those were very useful in allowing us to communicate with citizens. And the hard work that our city staff did in monitoring the situation and finally getting it corrected. Much appreciated.
And can I speak?
Yes. Hold one second. Vice Mayor Lisa Lucas Burke, have you asked for the floor?
Yes, I backed the little hand,
get...
so I raised my hand. Yes.
All right, thank you. And then I'll go to Councilman Glover.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Patton and Ms. Tremier, for all of the information that you provided to us, because we were being flooded with calls. But considering the age of our water system, we know that this may occur in some other community or at some other time. So other than the reverse 311, what kind of plans do we have to try to notify citizens should something like this or something different happen with our water system that we need to get information out urgently to the public?
The Mr. Pace just went over many of those ways that we utilized. What we did not utilize was the 911 and then the reverse, I think it was 311. And we're going to consider those in the meeting tomorrow as what the other things we could have added for our information to get out to our citizens.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Glover and then Councilman Battle.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Patton, this question may be for Mr. Jones or Mr. Pace. I know that many of our communities have neighborhood groups that are on social media. And I was just wondering, are we connected to those neighborhood groups that are specific to the neighborhoods as a part of our communication network?
I will ask Mr. Pace to speak, please.
Mr. Glover, yes, to answer your question, we are. There are several neighborhood groups on Facebook that we are connected with, and also on Nextdoor, which is a total separate social media website that's based on Portsmouth neighborhoods. We're also connected to that group. And within that group, we have well over 14,000 people that are subscribed to Nextdoor. So, yes, to answer your question.
Thank you.
Councilman Battle, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, I understand that emergencies, happen, and I think we did a fairly good job for what we were dealing with. But in your meeting, I'm just interested in what we're going to do the next time and how we're going to prepare ourselves, So if you could, I'd like some type of a document that could spell that out when you guys get a chance.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions?
I have one more comment.
Yes, Dr. Patton, you have the floor.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, just to remind you that we had the presentation about a month ago regarding public utilities and the way forward, looking 20 years down the road, addressing infrastructure. In September, we will be coming back because there were two options before you that you were to read and consider. We'll be coming back with a brief presentation in September and asking you which option you would like to move forward on, and that will require a resolution, Mr. Ashby, or an ordinance. It will require an ordinance. So in September, your first meeting, we'll be coming back with that. Thank you.
To my colleagues, we may not be prepared on that particular meeting to discuss it because we have not had a corporate discussion amongst ourselves on what we heard at the last meeting. So please take that into consideration. I think the important way to summarize this was a very unique situation where the leak was not obvious. It was clandestine, dumping into the Elizabeth River. And you're doing an after-action lessons learned exercise tomorrow. And per Councilman Battle's request, if you would summarize that for us and send it out. Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Let's go to our next item, which is City Attorney Solomon Ashby. Sir, you have the floor.
Multiple people are now exiting.
And members of City Council,
Solomon, if you would just wait 1 second, where as people are leaving, we're getting little breaks in the audio.
Okay.
I think we're good now. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, good evening. It is my pleasure to come back to City Council this evening and present a legislative update and the results of the City of Portsmouth's 2020 state legislative initiatives and outcomes. This report that I'm presenting to you is a joint effort between my office and our Intergovernmental Affairs Manager, Ms. Sherry Neal, who was very instrumental in both shepherding many of these initiatives through as well as preparing this presentation. I will go through some highlights and bring before you some of the issues that were put in place and the state laws that were put in place this legislative session. Next page, please. Of course, the highlight initiative this legislative session was the fact that the casino gaming bill in fact passed in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is very helpful for the city of Portsmouth. One of our additional initiatives was the decriminalization of the possession of less than 1 ounce of marijuana, and that was also a bill that we championed going forward. There were a number of bills passed and issues funded that are currently under suspension due to revenue issues concerning COVID-19, and we've got those listed on the screen. There's some initiatives under K-12 education, cleaning of the bay, 599 funding for local law enforcement, mental health programs, regional jail staffing, Virginia Housing Trust Fund, some local stormwater assistance fund initiatives, water quality initiatives, and some funding for both restoring community service boards as well as dealing with sea level rise issues in the Hampton Roads area. It is anticipated that many of these issues will be addressed in the special session set for August 18th, 2020. And we will bring back, as Dr. Patton has mentioned, we will come back in about 30 days to address those remaining issues that are not covered tonight. Once we know what the financial status and the funding status is from the state. Next page, please. Let's talk first about our first initiative, Senate Bill 812, House Bill 1244, championed by both Senator Lucas and Delegate Heritage, the unwanted telephone solicitation call bill, which did in fact pass. Now, under Virginia law, it requires the telephone solicitor to disclose who they are and what property, goods, or services they're offering. It prohibits ID spoofing, which means providing false names or false numbers as part of robocalls, as someone might call it, or telephone solicitation. And it provides a maximum fine of $1,000 for the offense, which goes to the state literary fund. Next page, please. Initiative 2, championed by Senator Locke and Delegate Scott, was, I believe, a 2-year initiative on behalf of the city to remove some of the felony conviction restrictions on TANF and SNAP benefits. The new law provides that persons who have felony drug convictions cannot be denied TANF or SNAP benefits, and removes some of the compliant conditions on the receipt of SNAP benefits. These efforts were put forward by the city in order to provide an opportunity to assist those returning to society to be full participating members. Next page. Senator Lucas also championed a pilot demonstration program for the upgrading of emergency shelters through a grant fund initiative. As you all know, the emergency shelters in various areas are often in need of upgrades and improvements. The initiative that was passed, the bill that was passed, provided an initial $2.5 million in the biennium to support grants to upgrade emergency shelters. There was an expectation that an additional $2.5 million would be provided in the 2021 General Assembly session. Currently, those dollars are subject to revision due to the fiscal impact of COVID-19. Next page. Initiative 4 was a budget amendment initially set forth by Senator Hanger. Ms. Neal was very instrumental in obtaining support through Senator Hanger to accomplish some of our city objectives. The issue was to get some, I would call it, to harmonize the legislation that pertains to the environmental and act, the Stormwater Act, the Chesapeake Bay Act, which all regulates stormwater, water use. We have 3 different acts currently, and they regulate activities in the area in slightly different ways. But we were able to get funding in order to get DEQ to hire a consultant to identify and eliminate the redundancies in the 3 acts so that they could be harmonized and enforced in a cohesive fashion. Next page. Initiative 5, championed by patron Senator Lucas, was funding for the Children's Museum of Virginia's 40th anniversary. Council, as you all know, the Children's Museum of Virginia was first founded in 1980 by the Portsmouth Service League, and it became part of the city's operated museum system in 1982. It is the region's only and the Commonwealth's largest museum of its kind. We welcome over 160,000 visitors each year to the city of Portsmouth. And in 2020, we are launching our 40th anniversary celebration. We originally sought a budget amendment requesting $200,000 in the fiscal year 2021 for support of this initiative. The city was awarded $100,000 to aid in a regional and statewide marketing and promotional campaign in support of the 40th anniversary. Next page. Initiative 6, championed by Senator Lucas and Delegate Heritage, was one that we pursued, and unfortunately is one of the few that did not succeed. As you all are aware, we were pursuing the opportunity for the city as a municipality to provide some telecommunication and broadband services to the general community. Unfortunately, that initiative did not pass as we sent it forth. But as you all know, and as you all will consider in the upcoming days, we now know that the COVID-19 pandemic presents a situation whereby the city must consider ways of providing broadband service to the general public and to our school age citizens. And that is the state initiatives. Next page, please. Now we go through a summary of some of the bills that were passed by the General Assembly in the 2020 session. Again, this is not all of the bills or not all of the relevant bills. We will come back and deal with some of those that have funding issues once the General Assembly reconvenes in August 18th. Next page, please. House Bill 1, Senate Bill 11 addresses absentee voting and expands the criteria for those who may wish to vote absentee. The bill removes the current list of statutory reasons under which someone may be entitled to vote absentee and removes those references, that being those restrictions, from various sections of the code. House Bill 19 expands the types of identifications that can be used for the purposes of voting. The bill allows one to provide their voter registration confirmation documents, a Virginia driver's license, a U.S. passport, identification issued by the Commonwealth of Virginia or one of its subdivisions, United States photo IDs, valid student IDs from Virginia public and private schools. It also allows college identification from other states, employer IDs with photographs, as well as the current utility bill and bank statements, government checks, and government documents that show names and the voter's address. Next page, please. House Bill 238, Senate Bill 455 changes the opportunities, expands the opportunities for voting by absentee ballot after the closing of the polls on election day, but before noon on the third day after the election. If an absentee ballot is postmarked on or before the date of the election, it shall be counted under current law. House Bill 239 extends the time for applying for absentee ballots, where prior one could simply apply for an absentee ballot 7 days prior to the election. We are now able to apply for, we must apply for an absentee ballot 11 days prior to the election. Next page, please. House Bill 240 expands those persons eligible for acquiring absentee ballot, such that anyone who is likely to be eligible during the remainder of a calendar year to vote absentee may now file a special annual application to receive ballots for all elections in a given calendar year for which they're eligible to vote absentee. House Bill 242 provides for the emergency, provides for an individual to apply for an absentee ballot under emergency conditions where they would, for particular reasons, be prevented from voting in person on an election day. Next page, please. House Bill 784 is a constitutional amendment. It provides for a referendum on our November 3rd, 2020 election to approve or reject amendments to the Constitution, establishing the Virginia Redistricting Commission and providing for the reapportionment of the Commonwealth for the purposes of election by that commission. House Bill 872 addresses voter registration by mail. It adds to the list of exceptions such that first-time voters under particular situations may be able to vote by mail, where otherwise state law provides your first vote must be in person. Next page. Senate Bill 35 addresses the control of firearms by locality. It authorizes localities to pass an ordinance to prohibit the possession or carrying of firearms, ammunition, or components thereof in any building or part thereof that's owned or used by the locality for governmental purposes. It allows restrictions for any public park owned or operated by the locality or any recreation or community center or any public street, road, sidewalk, or public right-of-way that is open to the public and it's being used by or adjacent to a permitted event put on or authorized by the city. HB 169, workers' compensation. This law expands the individuals who are eligible for workers' compensation benefits due to exposure to certain infectious diseases. Next page. HB 438 is also a workers' compensation bill. It provides that post-traumatic stress disorder incurred by law enforcement officers or firefighters is a compensable injury under the Virginia Workers' Compensation Act if a mental professional examines the law enforcement or firefighter and finds that the individual suffering post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of a qualifying event. This law greatly expands the availability of post-traumatic stress disorder benefits to public safety individuals, where in the past it required perhaps a series of events and evaluation of a series of exposures in order to qualify for post-traumatic stress disorder. In some cases, a single event may, in fact, make one eligible for workers' compensation benefits under this new law. Next page. HB 783 provides under the Workmen's Compensation Act a presumption of compensability, meaning a presumption that the disease or illness is in fact a work-related occupational disease. So it expands the list of cancers that are presumptively associated with the occupational disease for public safety officials. Next is HB 284, removal of roadside conditions. It authorizes a locality by ordinance to require owners of property located to adjacent to a public right-of-way to remove any trees, limbs, shrubs, high grass, or any other substance that might obstruct the line of sight of a driver or creates a situation where one might be involved in a collision or interfere with the safe operation of a vehicle. As you all are aware, we often talk about that triangle view when you pull up to a stop sign. And in many of our neighborhoods, we have folks who have perhaps shrubs or trees obstruct that view, so cars have to inch out into the roadway in order to see around those. This allows the city to pass an ordinance to require the owner to cut back those obstructions that interfere with line of sight on the city's roadways. HB 549, overgrown vegetation, authorizes localities in our planning district, Hampton Roads, to include provisions for cutting overgrown shrubs, trees, and vegetation where there may be vacant lots or underdeveloped properties, but those issues create concerns for the locality. Next page, please. HB 150, derelict residential buildings. This new law allows a locality that has a real estate tax abatement program to impose a civil penalty that doesn't exceed $500 a month on owners who have derelict residential properties that have not submitted a required plan to renovate within 90 days or otherwise authorizes the demolition of such properties and the imposition of other fees. Senate Bill 139, Freedom of Information Act, provides an in-person option for the training of those individuals who are required, such as local elected officials who are required to have FOIA training, as we call it. And the new law also includes constitutional officers under the definition of local elected officials. House Bill 696 provides that localities may prohibit discrimination in housing, employment, public accommodations, credit, and education on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. And the city has already integrated those provisions in the city's current administrative policies. Next page, please. We mentioned earlier HB 4 and SB 36, the casino bills. I want to also mention Senate Bill 384, which directs the Lottery Board to regulate sports betting within the Commonwealth of Virginia. That legislation provides a 15% tax imposed on adjusted gross income, and that revenue becomes part of the general fund for the state, with the exception of those funds that are set aside to support problem gambling. Next page, please. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the City Council. This is where I impersonate Ms. Neal as we talk about next steps for 2020. Ms. Neal is currently soliciting suggestions for the 2021, General Assembly session. We are conducting research on potential items for inclusion, and we will come back with first drafts of both federal legislation as well as state legislation. And at least at this point, we're looking at a meeting perhaps in November to discuss that with you all. November 18th may not be the precise date, but it will be in that November timeframe. One thing I will mention, having talked to Ms. Neal, there are currently some new restrictions on the number of bills that Assembly members can put forward. Therefore, she and I have discussed the fact that we may need to trim our submissions significantly because there will be such limitations with regard to how many items each member will be able to present in the upcoming session. And with that, I'll answer any questions. Next page.
Thank you. Thank you, Solomon. Any questions of our city attorney? I do have one. We put this on a future council meeting to brief us on the collective bargaining legislation that was enacted by the General Assembly. What the parameters are, how far does it go? I've already had, and my colleagues may have had the same thing, people reaching out wanting to talk to me about collective bargaining, and I have told them that the council has not been briefed. I would assume, given our charter, that the collective bargaining would style it so that it's between the city manager and the bargaining unit and not city council. And so when you brief us, if you would talk about those parameters. In addition, the General Assembly goes back on the 18th of August, and we all read the paper and hear the news. Two items that they're going to talk about. One is how to address any budget shortfalls due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The second is police reform. Talking on the first, we have to be vigilant as local governments in Virginia not to go back to what the General Assembly did during the Great Recession of 2008, when the General Assembly's told local governments, help us fill the gap. You pay us. And hopefully there's nobody in the General Assembly that wants to do that, but we need to be vigilant for that. Second, any mandates that may come about, police reform is important, but at the same time, if there are mandates that we have to do, we need to have the revenue to do that. And so it's important for Portsmouth and other localities to start thinking boldly about what to ask the General Assembly for if mandates come. And the bold ask would be, we need to find a fair and non-regressive source of revenue to fund any mandates like that. Sorry for the lecture or the sermon. The Virginia Municipal League is meeting its legislative committee and various policy committee meetings through the summer. The Finance Policy Committee will meet virtually the 30th of July on Thursday, and I'll chair that meeting. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
At some point as well, thank you, Mayor. At some point, can we get an update as it relates to any progress being made on tolling and tolling mitigation, perhaps? I know that we had the task force. I'm aware that there's been discussion with the Secretary of Transportation and some of our leadership in Richmond, but I don't know where some of that is gone, and I think it would be helpful to update this body on some of the things that are taking place.
That's a good question. I do chair the regional task force on that, and the co-chair is Mayor Alexander from Northam. The Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Valentine, called me within the last 2 weeks to inform me that they're still working hard. They don't have anything to report at this particular point in time. Message has been relayed to her that with ERC for sale, that don't close the door on the state purchasing ERC. So that's the update. She said I cannot share anything because some of the work that we're doing right now is confidential. But as soon as we can, she'll share it. But work continues. Yes, sir.
I do have one question, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you. With the bill that failed, the Senate Bill 351 and House Bill 1242 regarding the broadband access, I know that we're moving forward with Mr. Jones on doing something ourselves, but do we plan to have any kind of partnership with the school, Portsmouth Public Schools, to try to get internet and Wi-Fi access to those students who are without it? Since, I mean, it's looking like schools are going to be virtual for quite some time, and those students who don't have that access are not able to have those advantages that the persons who do have that access do. So do we have a plan to try to partner with public schools?
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Patton, can
Yes.
you answer that, please?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, we are working very closely with the schools, having continuous conversations. Mr. Jones is working with the schools. Conversation with Dr. Bracey yesterday as it relates to the exact subject. We heard today from the governor's office that there is going to be some additional COVID money coming to localities. He said within a couple of weeks. One of the things that Mr. Jones called to my attention is our partnership with the schools to try to find some ways in those outlying areas where they will. Mr. Jones, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Because okay, I'm gonna have Mr. Jones to speak directly to what the needs are in the areas that are right now without internet. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, good evening, council members. So as we presented some time back, the strategic connectivity study of what we evaluated the state of broadband throughout the city, those areas of what we will be focusing on, and those are mostly centered around the PRJ developments and strategic areas where broadband is less than adequate to perform virtual meetings, virtual schools, things of that nature. So that's what we'll be focusing on, of course, post authority should that go through, to be able to provide lit connectivity service to those citizens for a virtual learning environment.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. These are great questions. Any other questions or comments? All right. With that, we'll move on to our next report, and that's the CDA update. Dr. Patton. Oh, Solomon. I'm sorry, sir.
No,
You have
no
the
problem,
floor.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, Mr. Derek Challenger, Assistant City Attorney, will start that conversation. And as we said at the outset, Mr. Cherry is also available by phone if there is a need. Mr. Challenger, proceed.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the City Council. I'm going to be doing an update on the CDA briefing that we started 2 weeks ago. Can we go to the next slide? So I wanted to start with a little bit of a history involving the Newport Community Development Corporation. The CDA was created by ordinance by City Council in 2005. CDAs in general are designed to allow public-private partnerships to be formed to finance and develop infrastructure and other improvements such as signage, utilities, lighting, fencing, sidewalks, etc. Next slide. This is from the City Manager Report in 2005, which provided some interesting history. Newport will be a planned residential community. Various infrastructure improvements are to be funded by bonds issued by CDA. The bonds will be paid by special assessment against property within the CDA and no cost to the city. You can go to the next slide. There were $16.2 million worth of bonds that were issued to finance certain public infrastructure improvements. That funding, that $16.2 million, was able to provide public improvement of a section of the development, but other sections of the development received no improvements. Next slide. This is information involving the public auction. Well, we've established a an auctioneer to do the auction. His name is Dan Pegalo. His company is at Auction Inc. The auction will be an online auction. The tentative auction closing date will be September 29th, 2020 or September the 30th, 2020. There is, in addition to what's on the slide, there is a 10% buyer's premium for the bids at the particular auction. So this is how the auctioneer is going to get paid, is 10% will be added to the cost of the winning bids as compensation for the auctioneer. Andy.
Derek? I don't know if we lost him there. Next slide. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, what you see in front of you is a section of the special assessment agreement between the city treasurer the city and the CDA. And just let me know if he comes back on. It provides, as you can see, the city shall bill the annual assessment in the same manner and at the same time as it bills real estate taxes. This provision also provides that the annual installment shall be included in the city's regular real estate tax bill and be billed and collected in the same manner as the city's real estate taxes. Next page. Virginia Code Section 15.2 -5158. This is in response to some of the questions asked, I believe, by you, Mayor, with regard to taxes. It provides that any special tax herein levied shall constitute a lien, and it shall rank on par with the real estate taxes, and any delinquent special tax may be collected in accordance with the procedures set out in the ordinance. Thus, they do constitute a lien equivalent to real estate taxes on the property. Mr. Challenger. Next page. When we talk about priority, Virginia Code Section 58.1 3913 provides that any payment shall be credited first against the most delinquent local accounts. And so it is common practice to pay off the oldest delinquencies in the treasurer's office first and then move forward from that standpoint. Next page. Here are two other code sections, again, that speak to the fact that in all likelihood funds will be applied to the oldest debts first and then move forward to the newer debts as it relates to both the special assessments and the real estate taxes. Page 10. Next page. There was a question in terms of fees. To date, the attorney's fees in this matter are $160,000, $160,012.50, and the costs are $4,406 attributed to Sands Anderson, which is the law firm being utilized to address the tax sale and the special assessment issues. There's also a $5,000 appraisal fee. The appraisal was required under state law, and so the $5,000 appraisal fee is for the real estate company. Next page. I believe we discussed a bit. We are marketing all 4 parcels collectively. However, we cannot eliminate the possibility that the investors may only bid on a particular parcel and not all 4 collectively. Next page. Mr. Challenger.
Yeah, I'm here.
Go right ahead.
Next page. This is a map of the 4 parcels. Parcel A is 3001 Greenwood Drive, which is 6.5 acres. The yellow section, which is on the lower right-hand side, is 0 Greenwood Drive, and that's 18.87 acres. The blue section, which is in the upper left quadrant, is 0 McLean Street, which is 30.49 acres. And then the final parcel is the red parcel, which is 3741 Elliott Avenue. And next slide.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, I wanted to give you a bit of an update with regard to the authority, the Community Development Authority, they do have annual meetings. The authority is composed of residents. Dr. Patton, the city manager, sits on that board also, as well as, I believe, one appointed party that may not be a resident. As an update and as information for you, in the last unapproved minutes, it was stated that, as you see before you, since September 1 of 2015, all scheduled debt service payments on the CDA bonds have been deferred at the direction of the bondholders. Next page. Also on those minutes, I failed to advise you all at the last meeting that I did make an inquiry and a request from the authority to assume and reimburse the city for a portion of the attorney's fees, due to the fact that the authority does have responsibility for paying some of the collection costs under the agreement. And so at that time, I advised them that the fees associated with the litigation were approximately $128,000. And they are going to take up and review the billing in order to determine how they can pay a portion of that. Next page. What I'm showing you now is a table out of the minutes and the reports of the CDA, the Newport Authority, CDA Authority. You see at the top section the interest payments on the debt for 1 year. They are approximately $350,000 payments, which equates to about $1 million of debt service annually. The administrative fees are about $56,000 annually. And you will see in the bottom section available funds that they're all zeros in terms of available funds. Next page. Table D is a table that discusses the administrative expenses. You'll see the administrative expenses for the CDA, trustees fees, $3,600, $1,500 for CDA meetings, $18,000 to the administrator, CDA council, which we are not, has a fee of $25,000. City collection cost of $2,500, $3,000 for CDA audit, insurance, and various miscellaneous expenses totaling $56,275. Next page, please. This is a snapshot of the special assessment roll. It provides on the left tax parcel numbers for properties that have the tax assessment. You see in the leftmost column the special assessment outstanding amount, the principal portion for each parcel identified, and their annual installment, which is roughly $686. Where you see zeros, those are parcels that have either had their special assessments paid off. In many cases, those were paid off in one transaction or another, perhaps by a subsequent buyer. So I just provide that to you as an example. There are a number of tables associated with that. That is just one. Next page. Any questions?
Thank you, Solomon. Any questions from any member of council?
Yes,
All right,
I have one, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. You have the floor.
Thank you. Attorney Ashby, the CDA, is this in place with the members just to get the development up and going, and will it go away after a developer comes in and buy or purchase the lot? Just how does that work? Is this something that guides it throughout the process, or how long is this process set up for?
I think that was the intention at the outset. There are a number of people who own properties there, and they are required to make that special assessment until their portion is paid off. So those assessment fees are continuing both on the 4 large parcels that we have subject to auction, as well as individuals who have developed properties within the CDA.
Solomon, isn't it true that the CDA cannot go away until the debt is paid off?
Correct. Those
Yes.
obligations don't go away until they're
Yeah.
otherwise resolved, and that's part of the litigation that we have going forward.
Okay.
Councilman Glover, I think I saw your hand up. Yes, sir. You have the floor.
Yes, Mayor. Question. It's my understanding with the current CDA, with the auction, assuming these parcels are sold, any developer that buys them would still be subject to the assessment. Is that correct?
That is correct. Subject to the assessment going forward. Yes.
Right. Subject to assess. So I guess, doesn't that create a disincentive for a developer to really want to, I guess, buy this property in order to develop it? If I'm looking at some of the scheduled fees that I looked at, you're talking about an annual amount of $1 million in assessment fees or better. That's kind of a disincentive. Would you agree with that?
Councilman Glover, let me say, there are certainly some issues with regard to buying the property going forward, but there are quite a bit more benefits for the city. The treasurer certainly is here on the line and he can speak to those, but the only way you're going to move these properties forward from their current stagnant position is to put them out for sale in hopes that you have an active buyer.
But to join in the discussion, there are not many CDA success stories across the state for the very reason that Councilman Glover is talking about. They look good on paper, but in reality, they're not all that great. I think Councilman Battle, did you have your hand up? Did I see your hand go up? You're muted, sir. You're on mute.
Is Mr. Cherry still with us?
I think so.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Cherry, what skin do we have in this game? And how long has this...
Skinner, are you referring to money?
What I'm saying
the
is...
skin we have in the game is, Councilman, about of the $11 million that's owed, about 4.8, almost $5 million that is owed to the city in taxes, and the rest of it to the bondholders. So that's the skin we got in the game to collect that money. And the other side of that, to go back to what Councilman Glover was referring to, it would be great if we through this process somehow could get some kind of agreement to get rid of the CDA, because he's right. It would be a deterrent. Right now, as he said, there's over $1 million due on it every year, and every year there's over almost $900,000 of it that's unpaid because we're only getting it from the persons who have bought homes out there. And those persons who bought homes out there have having somewhere between $180 and $200 plus added to their payments every month. My office, on the other hand, collects this money just like we do all other taxes for a measly $2,500 a year. So it's a lot of work for my office for $2,500 a year. It would be my hope that through this process we could get some kind of agreement with the bondholders or somebody when this money is sold, that we could come to some kind of settlement and get rid of the CDA, because as Mr. Baldwin and I cautioned the city council back in 2006 when I was planning commission chairman, it was a bad idea then. It's a bad idea now, and this thing has followed me since 2006. I've been as a planning commissioner. Then I was on council when the place went belly up, and now I'm here as a treasurer trying to get it back on the tax roll. The flip side of it for us, I know your last meeting you talked about, Councilman Battle, about the monies and what we were going to make. Even if we don't make all the money back, if we can get these properties back on the tax roll, that in itself will be of a great benefit to us, because right now we're getting nothing for the undeveloped properties. So it's twofold for us. We could get it back on the tax roll and make some of the back taxes back. Hopefully all of it, but that's highly unlikely. But as much as we can of it back to benefit the city as a whole and benefit our coffers.
So we have property. So we have property that's worth $10 million, and we don't know whether we're gonna get anything for it or not. And we don't know whether we'll end up having to incur what debt is left if we have this option.
So it's not our debt.
It's not our debt.
It's not our debt.
Well, whose debt is it?
We're doing the tax collection then. It's not our debt.
It's the debt of the CDA, and that's the rub. In order for the CDA to go away, the debt's got to go away, and the debt goes away either by paying it off, or there'd be a huge default. And
well, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
You have the floor.
You go
ahead. Go ahead. No, I'm finished.
Is there any? You were saying that we could get the EDA out of it. Is this land? Could this land be more valuable to us doing something else with it, and not going through the process that we're going through with it? Is it valuable land that somebody else could come in later if we got the EDA out of it?
Mr. Battle, well, the EDA doesn't own the land. It's privately owned land, not publicly owned land.
Well, what I'm saying, Mr. Chair, is this the best option that we have for this land? Is there anything better that we could do that we wouldn't incur such a large loss?
This is the process, because there's no taxes being paid on it, and in order to get it back on the tax roll, it's going to have to be sold to someone who wasn't to pay the taxes. If we could sit here and not track it, but my job is to collect the taxes, and when it comes to a point where taxes aren't collected, with the court, in accordance with law, after 2 years, it can be sold at public auction. And I've been following that process since I got here in 2018, and this is part of my normal process for lands that go unpaid in taxes.
Okay.
The chair recognizes the city attorney. Sir, you have the floor.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council, I want to make one other point, just so everyone is aware. As Mr. Cherry has said, it is the hope through this process that we get a new owner, a taxpayer, someone who recognizes the opportunity and is willing to expend the funds to develop the property, to expand it. One thing, and why we're going to auction, is to try to get the best, highest value for that property. And one thing that was not said when we showed you the picture of the properties involved, in that lower left-hand corner of that map is your entertainment district. So, go right ahead. So where you see the legend here, where the ABC is, that is your entertainment district. And so you understand when we put this up for auction,
Okay.
we do think we have a better situation than we did some 5 or 10 years ago.
Solomon, I think it's important for the public to understand that all four colors are owned by a private entity, not by any public entity like the city or the EDA.
That is correct.
And just like any taxpayer, this property owner is in default in paying their property taxes.
Okay.
And they've been in default long enough that we can auction off their land for taxes. But it gets a little bit more complicated because in addition to being in default on the taxes, they're default on paying their debt. And they haven't paid it looks like to me on page 15, they haven't paid any debt service in 5 years. And on page 17, the debt service requirement is almost $1.2 million.
That's correct.
And so 5 times 1.2 gives you, they're in the rears by $10 million in, wait a minute, 5 times, 5 million, almost $6 million in debt. That's what Paige Sherry said.
I have a satisfactory perspective at this point.
Yes, sir. This was a very good presentation, and thanks for going into that level of detail. To my colleagues on council, any further questions?
I just have one just clearing up for me why some of the properties have address numbers and some of them have 0. Were those properties did never have anything on them? I want to understand.
And Vice Mayor, I can tell you about some of them. I can't tell you about specific ones. When the original developer stopped developing, we had a portion of the land that was somewhat developed. It had infrastructure within it. Sometimes I refer to them as pipe farms. They had the pipes coming out, but no houses or anything, but they were fully plumbed. Subsequent buyers bought those properties, and in order to make them more attractive, paid off the special assessment for those particular lots. And so therefore you have some lots with no special assessment because a subsequent owner, other than the original developer, paid off the special assessment in a negotiated deal with the bondholders.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excuse me, Mayor, I have one other question.
Yes, sir, you have the floor.
This is for Attorney Ashby. Attorney Ashby, I understand with the City of Portsmouth versus Cygnus Newport, based on the strategy, and I don't guess you can reveal everything here, and I certainly understand that. Is it a hope or a desire of us to kind of get the bondholders to perhaps settle at a certain cost in order to just cut their losses and maybe dissolve the CDA so that we can move it forward? Is that kind of an idea or a hope or a desire?
We have certainly had discussions with the bondholders such that perhaps they could or consider purchasing the land themselves and sort of fix the deal for themselves. So that's a potential. But as I said, whether it be the bondholder or whether it be some other person capable, yes, it's our objective to put this property in a status such that it generates revenue for the city and it's a development and not simply raw land sitting stagnant in the city.
And the last question I have on that, also in this whole deal with the CDA, didn't we have folks that bought these lots that make a claim that they may have not understood it at all and been adversely affected? I mean, some of our citizens are affected as well, right?
Well, they're all our citizens, I believe, Councilman, because
Right.
the Newport, because of the way it's structured. I will tell you, I'll give you an interesting story. Every year we have the authority meeting, and my office attends. Dr. Patton, as I said, is on the authority board, and so the authority, some of the authority members are constantly questioning their ongoing assessment payment, understanding that some subsequent properties have no assessment payment because they were paid off by subsequent buyers. And they know that the bondholders are negotiating or at least interested in trying to come to some resolution as it relates to the 4 parcels up for auction. So the residents of Portsmouth are scratching their heads about this deal, and there are elements that some have a lack of clarity about in terms of how we end up in this current situation.
And there's a built-in unfairness to early buyers in this, because the whole concept of the CDA is that the public improvements that are supposed to be done by the private developer, the streets, the lights, the utilities, the storm sewer, will be paid by the sale of bonds by the CDA, with the debt service being paid by the home buyers as they buy the property. And we're finding, if the bond buyers take a haircut and the assessments go down, future buyers may pay a lower assessment than those folks who bought the property in 2005. It's a mess. I mean, CDAs look good on paper, but there's not now I'm not aware of a good CDA story in the Commonwealth of Virginia. This has been a very, very good discussion and good participation by council. Thank you. Any need for any additional information? We know that you'll keep us posted, Mr. City Attorney.
I will, Mayor.
All right. We now come
I'm ready.
to Dr. Patton.
Yes, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, we have 2 report backs. One is a
Unknown
first
participant
responder
is
base
now
pay.
exiting.
Councilman Clark asked for an item to increase the base pay of first responders, fire, police, and paramedics by $2,000 for this agenda for consideration by City Council. Mrs. Elizabeth Gooden, Director of Human Resources, will make a report back, followed by Dr. Patton making a COVID-19 frontline relief presentation. Mrs. Gooden. Mrs. Gooden.
Sorry, I didn't have my mute off. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. At your last council meeting, a question was raised regarding the cost associated with providing a $2,000 base salary increase for sworn public safety. This report tonight is a response to your question. For the proposed base salary increase, as you see, for sworn fire, there's currently 203 active members. For sworn police, 199. When we made our compensation, did our analysis, we include the amount of the salary increase, which is $804,000. And we also, along with that amount of that salary increase, we also include any mandatory payroll, unemployment taxes, employee-related retirement contributions as examples to bring our direct cost to a little bit over $1 million. The next thing you'll see there was a question about what would the 5-year impact would be. Using pretty much a salary projection formula, we used the existing salaries for all sworn employees. We projected just a 3% GWI, general wage increase over the next 5 years, and this resulted in a little bit over a $4 million impact. This factor does include some of the associated mandatory and payroll taxes that we also spoke about. In addition to that, some of the additional costs that I also show on the screen is, of course, when the hourly rate goes up, there'll be an increase in overtime cost. Mr. Ashby discussed about workers' compensation, some changes in the workers' compensation laws. There will be some increases to workers' compensation exposure. And also we've included the retirement. As you know, I believe in the last year or two, we increased the multiplier for our sworn public safety and our EMS professionals, which is a great thing. Also, for fiscal year 2021, we did budget for a 3% general wage increase. And for the general fund, we have allocated and held in abeyance $1.2 million. Also, as part of the fiscal year 2021 budget process, we did talk about that we were going to do a compensation study for fiscal year 2021 and also include members of fire and police and other impacted employees. We have started, we're in the beginning stages of getting our compensation study, and we're currently at the RFP stage, developmental stage, if you will. So in essence, that's what the impact would be for sworn public safety. And I'm open to any questions.
Any question by any member of council?
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, is that Councilman Moody? Sir, you
Yes.
have the floor.
Retirees, and I direct the question to City Manager Patton. What can we do for retirees? Historically, even though it was never in writing, we've done 50% of what general wage employees have received. And I take it that this would come about, the 3% would come about in October. Is that correct?
You want me to speak, Mayor?
You'll be getting
Yes.
back.
Oh,
with us.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, as Mrs. Gooden had indicated, being held in abeyance because of our COVID-19 budget is the 3% for general wage employees, which includes all full-time employees, and all full-time includes public safety, EMS, 911, in general wage employees. As I indicated to you all in presenting that budget, that we would consider come back to you in October to, by that time we would have the end of the year, the first quarter assessments of our revenues, but that 1.2 million is in the budget and being held in abeyance. Mr. Moody's question, I guess, to me is when in October, or as we move toward October, the ask is, which if council gives the direction for me, to look and see during that time what consideration could be given to retirees as it pertains to some kind of, we call theirs a bonus, I think, and Mrs. Gooden, correct me if I'm using the wrong language, for our retirees. And with council's direction, I guess after I get through my next presentation, you would give me some direction.
I think if I followed the dialogue correctly, Councilman Moody, you're asking, can we consider doing something for retirees in the fall when we consider, when we consider implementing the 3%?
Yes.
And
yes.
Okay. And is it the consensus of council that we ask the city manager to tell us what that number might be? And she is also proposing a frontline relief. You want to cover that?
Yes.
We'll cover everything together. How about that in this discussion?
All right, if you would bring the presentation back up and the frame, please, for my presentation. That's right. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, in recognition of our employees who have been working tirelessly on the front lines responding to COVID-19 and keeping our community safe, I'm recommending $2,000 for sworn public safety employees to include EMS and 911 dispatchers. I'm recommending a $1,500 frontline relief for full-time general employees working in the departments of waste management, parks and recreation, and social services, supporting food distribution, and public works employees involved in COVID-19 related cleaning and sanitation. In these departments, there are part-time employees that work alongside our employees every day. I am proposing in this area for part-time employees to receive half of the full-time amount. We have approximately, this will cost approximately $1.6 million. These dollars could come out of the $8.2 million that we have received in the first wave of the CARES Act funding to support our frontline employees. The CARES Act provides for payments to state and local governments to assist them in the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The CARES Act requires the payments only be used to cover the following eligible expenses. The CARES Act funds can be used for necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19, any costs that were not accounted for in the budget most frequently approved as of March 27, the budget presented on March 27th, adopted May 12th, but adopted as a COVID budget. These funds cannot be used to usurp or not use our city funds. And in addition, recognizing and providing frontline employees who are working every day in this area, funds can be considered. We have to spend these funds, and these funds impact from March 1, 2020 and ends on December 30th, 2020. Any funds that are not spent will have to be returned to the state after that December 2020 timeframe. And I think, Mayor, if I may, while I'm talking about COVID funds, I would like to just update council on right now the $8.2 million and how we're proposing and using it and allocating it. When we look at public health expense, you are aware, and I've been keeping you apprised of the buildings. We have had to disinfect 12 buildings thus far, and 1 building twice. That includes the cleaning and other supplies, safety shields for our employees entering the building. We are also looking to address restroom fixtures, because the places where you got to touch the hand to cut the faucet on, CDC is saying in public places, those kinds of touch places need to be considered, where you can have where you just put your hand under, you don't touch anything, you put your hand under, and you know, in airports and things, we already have that. And we're also looking for technology to enhance our telework assistance at BDH testing events. And that includes that $1 million for public health expenses. For the frontline workers, hazardous pay, that's the $1.6 million I just described. We're also, you approved the grant for the $400,000 for our home and renters and mortgage citizens who are impacted. With that said, that $400,000, we are recommending to place over there an additional $2 million. We have approximately 15 to 1,700 citizens who are estimated through social services that will and are impacted by the end of the exemption for persons who had a stay on not having to pay their rents, their mortgages. You are aware, and we already have in place the local business economic support of $1 million. The CARES Act, and I shared with, we were going to get a clearance, could that be used? And the city of Chesapeake has put theirs in place, but we're looking to implement a CARES Act utility relief fund of $1,200,000. That utility relief fund could assist citizens that are affected by COVID-19 that cannot pay their water, their gas, or their electricity bills. That fund would be managed by social services as they manage right now the home relief. And then that would leave 1.4 million right now in contingency. And one thing we are looking at is upgrading our, and this could be used for it, upgrading our elevators, particularly in City Hall with card keys, and I'm saying CARD keys, where you don't have to touch the numbers in order to go from floor to floor. And this is some areas that they are recommending to keep people from having so many touch points within public buildings. So that is in totality of what we are looking to expend. So Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
I put the last slide back up, please. Whoever's doing the slides. Hello?
I'm sorry, which slide, Mr. Mayor?
The last page that you had up. Page 2. Let's see if I can summarize this. We have 3 alternatives. The first alternative is what Councilman Clark asked, which was a $2,000 increase for public safety at a cost of $1 million, $1,045,200. The second alternative is a 3% increase that would be considered in October, the fall. The third alternative is the 1.6 million. Yeah, the next frame, page 3. The 1.6. So I guess the discussion for council is, what do you want to do? Do you want to do all 3? Do you want to do 1? You want to do 2 of the 3? Just what is the consensus of council? With that, raise your hand and I'll recognize you. I think I see, yes, you can pull the frames away. I recognize Shannon Glover. Sir, you have the floor.
So before I let you know what my recommendation is, I'll need clarification from the manager on this relief money that will probably be immediate. And in addition to the relief, are we still considering the 3% in October?
Yes, sir.
That's my first question. So to me, my recommendation would be to do the relief for all of the employees, the frontline responders. In addition to that, commit to the 3% in October, because all of our frontline folks have been impacted. That includes the city workers as well as our police and fire. And we're certainly grateful for all the work that they do. And I want to just add to that. So my recommendation is to do the frontline relief and the 3%. And also, I want to say that during this whole pandemic, our citizens, in terms of our workers, have not been financially adversely impacted. The city manager and her team have committed to ensuring that no one lost a position or was furloughed. And I think that's a credit to our city. Other localities furloughed folks and had to make difficult decisions, but we stood by our employees and we made sure that we were committed to their health, safety, and welfare. And we certainly appreciate all the work that they've done. So I'm in favor of doing the frontline responder bonus, or whatever you want to call it, and then certainly committing to the 3% in October.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Simmons. And I'm going to take these as I see them. There's no order.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to defer to Councilman Clark. Because I think we have the same thing to say. Thank you.
All right, Councilman Clark.
Yes, I would concur with what Councilman Glover just said, and the reason being is when I presented this $2,000 base pay increase 5 weeks ago, this was before we had the information that we do now in reference to the CARES relief. And in addition, I wasn't sure that the 3% was coming back, but now that we're being told that that would come back. So at this time, I would withdraw my motion of the $2,000 base pay increase and go with the CARES supplement as well as the 3% in October. And one thing I'd like to point out is on that slide, it also included our 911 dispatchers, which is great. And that's something going forward. We should make sure that they're considered public safety at all times going forward because they are one of the key components. Because if nobody is answering the phone, the police cars and fire engines don't know where to go. So I would withdraw my original request from June of the 2000 and go with the CARES funding proposal and the 3% in October. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Paul Battle. You need to unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you so much. Is there any way that we can add the retirees, giving them $750 at this point when we're giving everybody else? Because they are the weakest among us, and during this time of the virus, they're going to be pumping vitamins in themselves that they wouldn't normally do to get their immune systems up. They're going to be buying a whole bunch of extra items to clean and hand wipes and things like that. So I think we ought to kind of consider giving them half of that 15 that we are looking at in October at this point. Because again, they're the weakest among us and they're on a pension at home, and these items are kind of expensive. So I think, it would be wise for us to include them as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. Vice Mayor Lisa Lucas Burke has asked for the floor. And ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to concur the comments of Councilman Glover and Councilman Clark. I think this is a great presentation. Dr. Patton and Human Resource Libby Giddens have presented to us to keep all of our employees in a whole status. And I know that we all have been receiving comments specifically what was Portsmouth going to do for our residents. And I think this is a great plan. And I know I'm glad to hear that Nathan withdrew, Councilman Clark withdrew that initial statement because we didn't know what was going to be offered. And we know that our public safety has been the front line people in this. So I think this package of the $2,000 for our sworn officers and the $1,500 for our general employees is a great package and a good use of the $1.6 million from the total from the CARES Act. But I would also like to look at in October when we're considering the 3% general increase for all employees, that we do try to honor what we've done in the past by giving our retirees a percentage half of what the wage employees would get. So thank you.
Thank you. I saw Councilman Moody put his hand up. Do you want the floor, sir?
Well, I've already.
Then I'll go to Councilman Battle.
I've already expressed my support for the 3%, and I agree with Councilman Clark. And I do think, if we could do the retirees, the 50% or the $750 sooner than October, I would certainly support that.
All right. Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Councilman Battle. Sir, you have the floor, and then Councilwoman Simmons. You're muted, sir. Paul, you're muted. Would you start over again because we didn't hear anything?
Of course, I concur with Clark and Glover. But in October, we don't know what we'll be dealing with. But we know we'll be dealing with this virus now. And to leave our retirees out, I think it shows lack of foresight and compassion on our side. And I will reiterate and ask the council to please consider adding them to this package as well.
Paul, you might be in the majority on this, as I've listened to members of council. Let's get Councilwoman Simmons and then the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to concur with Mr. Clark and Mr. Glover. I am all for I think the manager's recommendation on the CARES relief funding for our frontline employees is excellent, and I'm delighted to hear that she thinks the 3% will be a go in the fall. And at that time, I'd be happy to entertain a stipend for the retirees as well.
Dr. Patton, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Just to make sure that everybody understands that this 1.6 million are for the frontline workers. It's not for all city employees. It's only those who are labeled frontline workers. And I also would like to call to your attention that the most COVID positives in our city have been among the groups who are the front line. And I will name those groups again so that we will all be clear. We're saying, and you're correct, Mr. Clark, going forward, we need to make sure that when we say public safety, we include 911 dispatchers. And we had that discussion, Mrs. Gooden and I, when we in fact, Mrs. Gooden was the one to say, Dr. Patton, we don't usually include, but they are our frontline workers. In many instances, getting our fire and police out to where they have to go. So we're looking at the fire, police, EMS, 911 dispatchers. We're looking at those who are on the front line in parks and recreation. They are delivering food and preparing food every day in our centers. They're working with the schools, cafeteria team that's cooking the food at IC North. That has been going on since March, and it will go on indefinitely. We're also looking at the social services. Every food distribution, which we've had about 6 or 7 at Northam, we have others planned. Those are social services employees that are out there for 6 to 7 hours. Every bag of potatoes is gone. And lastly, Public Works. They are cleaning our buildings, wiping down all over the city, all of our public buildings. So this is only for those frontline workers. The 3% in October is for everybody who is a full-time city employee. And years ago, when we said general wage, people wouldn't say police and fire, but general wage defined over the past 5 years is all city employees, full-time. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Did I miss anybody? Has anybody asked for the floor? Councilman Battle.
I like to say that this council shows lack of compassion, again, for our senior retirees. And I'll say it one more time. They have to try to pump their immune systems up to safeguard them against this virus. They have to buy all of the things that we buy that have gone up quite a bit, and to leave them out of this situation, I think shows lack of compassion and caring for them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's ask our city manager, can the CARES money be used for our retirees, Dr. Patton?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, the CARES money can can only be used for COVID-related frontline workers in municipal government. It cannot be. Now, the COVID money can be used to help our elderly, our retirees who may have problems with paying their light, gas, or electricity through the home and the fund that we're setting up for those things through social services. But it cannot usurp, whereas we in the past give stipends to the retirees, as you have asked, I think, for me to consider with the October 3%. That has to be city's money. It cannot be this federal or state money, and federal money that came through the state. It has to be used for what it's designated.
Let me try to sum up what I think where we are. I think we have a clear consensus that will implement the CARES frontline payment per page 3 of the slide. That will implement the 3% in October, and that will give consideration to retirees, either a increase or a stipend of some sort. And I think in order for us to have a good discussion about that, we need to know what those numbers are. So with the consensus of council, let's ask the city manager to tell us, and send it out as soon as you get the numbers, what a 50% increase in the retirement benefit would be implemented in October through the end of the year, and versus a stipend. And I don't have an amount for the stipend.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Is that a consensus of council? Okay. So let's agree on $1,000 stipend. Is that agree to have a point of comparison?
Yeah.
Is that agreeable? Okay.
That
Can I see
$1,500?
Thumbs up,
sir?
What did we do last time? Wasn't it $1,500?
I would have to look, Mr. Moody, and I'll get back with you.
Yeah,
Well,
I think we should
It wasn't
use the last figure. I think it was 15.
I'll get that to you. I will get it to you.
Councilman Clark, you're muted. If Councilman Clark, can you unmute? I'll recognize you.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
The last amounts over the last few years was $500, and
Yeah.
that was half of the $1,000 that the working employees were receiving.
So $1,000 would be agreeable.
Okay. All right. So we're going to ask the city manager to get that and get it to us before the October meeting so that we can make a decision in October. Do we have a consensus? Okay. Very good discussion. Let's make sure the CARES money is already appropriated, so you can implement that.
But I want you to know that we will move starting tomorrow to get that in check within the next 2 weeks.
I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Say again.
I said, yes, you have appropriated and approved the 8.2 that we're utilizing. The frontline, what do we call it? The frontline, what did we call it? I got it. The frontline workers, okay. That will be processed and ready to go in the checks in the next 2 weeks. I'll start that tomorrow.
All right. We're all good. We're now going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which is public hearing, which is item 20-188. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption here, please, of the public hearing?
Yes, sir. Virtual public hearing on the city's intent to remove relocate, contextualize, and/or cover the Confederate monument located on Court Street in accordance with Virginia Code subsection 15.2-1812B as enacted effective July 1, 2020.
Now, this is the public hearing. We have an action item on this matter under new business. And before I open the public hearing, just to put this in context, on October the 10th, 2017, the Portsmouth City Council adopted a resolution to move the Confederate monument from its current location at High and Court Street to Cedar Grove Cemetery as soon as the governing laws clearly permit its relocation. In the last session of the General Assembly enacted House Bill 1537, which amended the state code to allow the moving or removal or contextualizing of such monuments. But it stipulated a process, one of which was to have a public hearing in which we had to advertise 30 days. This is, in fact, the public hearing that is required by the new law. And Madam Clerk, this has been advertised?
Yes, sir.
For the provisions of the code?
That's correct.
Okay. At our last meeting, we said that we would start taking comments as soon as possible leading up to the day's public hearing. Did we do that, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir, we did.
And how many comments have we received?
We received 55 comments, both email and voicemail.
And they have been transcribed, is that correct?
Yes, sir, and the comments have been provided to City Council and will be made a part of the official minutes of the City Council.
As with all public comments that have been made on any agenda item, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. With that, I will open the public hearing, and the record will show that we have received, how many comments again?
55 comments.
I knew the number, but I thought it was important at the public hearing. And
Yes,
that
sir.
these comments will be transcribed, or they have been transcribed, provided to each member of council, and will become part of the permanent written record of this meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct.
With that, I declare this public hearing closed. We're now at item 20-189, which is the consideration of the adoption of a certain ordinance. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption of that ordinance, please?
Yes, sir. Let's see. Making sure we got the right thing here. Okay. An ordinance accepting $339,735 of Community Development Block Grant Program income and appropriating said amount in the FY 2021 Community Planning and Development Program Fund budget.
So that we can put this matter before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt this ordinance?
Move adoption.
Is there
Second.
a second? We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded. And Madam Clerk, did we receive any comments on this particular item?
No,
From the
sir.
public? Okay. We're now ready to discuss the motion, which is to adopt. Ready for the question? This will be a roll call vote. If you're in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye when your name is called by the clerk. If you're opposed, nay. Madam Clerk, will you call the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle,
Aye.
Mr. Clark,
Aye.
Mr. Glover,
Aye.
Mrs. Lucas Burke,
Aye.
Mr. Moody,
Aye.
Ms. Simmons,
Aye.
Mira.
Aye. We're at item 20-190, which is the consideration of the adoption of a certain ordinance. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption of that ordinance, please?
Yes, sir. An ordinance, one, accepting COVID-19 emergency funds in the amount of $34,976 from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and appropriating said sum in the FY 2021 grants fund to support costs associated with the Portsmouth Homeless Action Consortium Continuum of Care, and two, authorizing the transfer of $8,744 from the FY 2021 Social Services Fund budget and appropriating said sum in the FY 2021 Grants Fund to serve as the required local match for the COVID-19 funding.
Thank you, ma'am. So that we can put this matter before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt?
Move for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, you got that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're ready for discussion on the motion. Do we have any public comments on this, Madam Clerk?
No, sir, we did not.
Okay. Any further discussion by members of council? We're ready for the question. Again, this will be a roll call vote. If you're in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting aye, opposed nay. And Madam Clerk, will you call the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Glover?
Aye.
Mrs. Lucas Burke?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Aye.
Ms. Simmons?
Aye.
Mira?
Aye. We're now at item 20-191, which is the consideration and adoption of a certain ordinance. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption of that ordinance, please?
Yes, sir. An ordinance accepting an emergency food and shelter national board program grant in the amount of $9,989 from the Department of Homeland Security and appropriating said sum in the FY 2021 grants fund for use by the Department of Social Services to assist eligible Portsmouth citizens who have emergency shelter or utility needs.
So that we can put this matter before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt?
Move adoption.
Move for adoption.
Is there a
Second.
second? Good. We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, sir.
Ready for the question? If you're in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting aye when your name is called, nay if you're opposed. Madam Clerk, call the vote, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Glover?
Aye.
Mrs. Lucas Burke?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Aye.
Ms. Simmons?
Aye.
Mira?
Aye. We come down to new business. We actually have three items. The third item is a motion to appoint City Council as the board for the new Technology Authority. That will be item C. We're at item 20-192A, which is the consideration of a certain resolution. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption of that resolution?
Yes, sir. A resolution authorizing and directing the removal and relocation of the Confederate monument located in Court Street near the intersection with High Street.
So that we can put this matter before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt?
Move for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded. We've already had a public hearing on this motion. So we've heard from the public. Any discussion on the motion by City Council? The chair recognizes Councilman Moody. Sir, you have the floor.
Does that not include the repairing of the monument after it's relocated? And our storage, if in the interim storage may be needed.
Can you answer that question, Dr. Patton?
Yes, Mayor, and members of City Council, we are looking to place the monument in a storage area. I will not say at this time exactly where.
That's
How
one
about
part of his question.
Yeah, the repairing was the other part.
What is this other part, Mayor?
Does this include the repair of the monument?
No, the moving of it does not include the repair. What will be gathering, and we've had contractors, Mr. Wright shared with me this evening when I saw him leaving the building that there was a team there today that's looking at the monument to see what are the things that may need to be done. So that's not included in the removal of it, no.
So what you're saying, it's a work in progress. You're doing an assessment
That's right.
of what needs to be repaired. So it's a yes but answer.
Okay.
The chair recognizes Councilwoman Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, as you recaptured the history when we began this meeting, that this council has voted on this more than once already in the last few years. And during the vote in 2017, I did vote no to relocation of the monument. However, tonight, we're in a different time and place, and I think the right thing to do is to move this monument into a cemetery appropriate setting. I hope that Oak Grove will work or something similar. Of those 55 comments we got from citizens, the overwhelming majority were to do that. I always think it's important particularly when a council member changes their vote, to say why. And I think this is the right thing at this time in history and in our country. And so I will be voting yes to the resolution to relocate.
Good. Are we ready for the question? This is a motion to adopt the resolution. If you're in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. If you're opposed, nay. Madam Clerk, will you call the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Glover?
Aye.
Mrs. Lucas Burke?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Aye.
Ms. Simmons?
Aye.
Mayor Rowe?
Aye. The resolution is adopted, is it not? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
We're at item B, and will you read the caption of this is the consideration of a certain resolution. Will you read the caption? And before we do that, I want to commend council on a unanimous vote. We're doing the right thing. And I think it's important to note that in 1945, Frank D. Lawrence, one of the icons of Portsmouth history, voted to move the monument. And so tonight's vote is consistent with a vote that took place in 1945. This is the sixth time that we've had this discussion, we being the Portsmouth community. It started as early as March of 1927. Councilman Moody.
Mayor, I have one other question about that. Are we still under the 30 days before we proceed to move that, or what will be our timeline on the removal?
The state code and not to.
It does not. We can move it.
We can't move it within 30 days, according to the code.
Okay.
Actually, City Attorney, you want to answer that question? You can move it, but you can't dispose of it.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
You can move, but you must consider any offers made as it relates to it. And so, should we get any offers with regard to disposition, that becomes a bit of a question. As I said to you all, you're not obligated to take up those options, but there is a, for lack of a better word, an option period where someone could make an offer to accept the monument.
Good. And the chair recognizes Councilman Moody. You asked for the floor.
Yes, and while we on the subject of the monument, as all of us know, we've had a lot of citizens asking why charges haven't been brought against those identified committing vandalism on June the 10th. Now, city attorney addressed the issue with council, but that was in a closed meeting during our last council meetings. I think it's important in the spirit of transparency at the appropriate time that the city attorney share that information with our citizens. They want to know why no one's been charged, if there are plans to do so, and I think that's important. We are a city, a state, a country that follows the rule of law, and I think it would be good for our citizens to hear from a city attorney on that subject, unless there are any objections.
Wouldn't it be appropriate to discuss that when we get the report from the state police? I think that's what we said at the last meeting.
Well, according to Lieutenant Jenkins, head of investigations, the only investigation they're doing is Mr. Green's situation that who got hit by one of the falling soldiers on the monument. He didn't know of any other investigation other than that.
Well, let's put this on a future meeting, and I think it would be appropriate to do it when we do get whatever report we get from the state police. With that, we're at item B, which is the consideration of the adoption of a certain resolution. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption of that resolution, please?
Yes, sir. A resolution canceling the city council meeting scheduled for August 11th, 2020.
So that we can put this matter before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt this resolution? It dies for a motion.
So
Is there a second? There's a motion that's been duly made and seconded. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this?
Not during the time limit, no, sir.
And the reason is that there's nothing scheduled for the agenda, so there's no business. It's not. That's the reason why there is no meeting on August 11th.
Yes, sir.
All right, we're ready for the question. We are. This will be a roll call vote. If you're in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting aye. If opposed, nay. Madam Clerk, will you call the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Glover?
Aye.
Mrs. Lucas Burke?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Aye.
Ms. Simmons?
Aye.
Mira?
Aye. And C, we need to consider a motion to appoint City Council as the board for the city's IT authority. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? If you're in favor of the motion, this will be a roll call vote. Please vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Madam Clerk, will you call the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Glover?
Aye.
Mrs. Lucas Burke?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Aye.
Ms. Simmons?
Aye.
Mira?
Aye. We have a need for a closed session, and the clerk has the motion. I'll ask the clerk to read the motion, and then if a member of council is so motivated, if they would make the motion, then we'll get a second. And so, Madam Clerk, will you read the motion, please?
Yes, sir. A move to go into closed electronic meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsections 2.2-3708, A, 2.3 and 2.2-3711A1, 8.1, and City Council Ordinance 2020-21 for the purpose of discussion and consideration of the performance of City Council appointees.
Is there a motion to adopt the motion as read by the city clerk?
Motion to adopt.
Move for adoption. Second.
Is there a second? Okay. We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? We're ready for the vote. If you're in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting aye. If you're opposed, nay. Will you call the vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Glover?
Aye.
Mrs. Lucas Burke?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Aye.
Ms. Simmons?
Aye.
Mira?
Aye. To the public that's watching, council now is going into closed session.